The Allen Line Company thanks all the hard-working drivers who are moving goods across the country. We can't do it without you.
OOIDA, representing America's truckers since 1973, presents Landline Now with your host, Mark Redding.
A massive outage has hit AT&T customers nationwide, which has implications for ELD users on the network. It's actually the first major outage of a cell provider since the ELD mandate went into effect in late 2017, raising plenty of questions about what to do, what it means, and what comes next. OOIDA Executive Vice President Lewie Pugh and Tom Crowley of OOIDA's Business Services Department walk us through what we need to know. FMCSA plans to study detention time and how it affects trucking. But first, the agency needs to gather some information. I'll discuss that and more with OOIDA Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes. CVSA is in the middle of a week-long initiative in Canada to raise awareness about human trafficking. Landline Magazine's Ryan Witkowski talks with Dylan Wecht of Truckers Against Trafficking. And finally, lawmakers in several states are working on solutions to the truck parking problem. Scott Thompson will discuss that and more with our state legislative expert, Keith Goebel. And now, here's Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Mark. We'll spend some time over the next several minutes drilling down into an event that may have affected you on Thursday. Tens of thousands of AT&T customers were hit with an outage, and to a smaller degree, some Verizon and T-Mobile customers as well. A nuisance to be sure, but the outage has wider implications for a trucking industry. That depends on cell coverage to maintain electronic logging devices. Joining us to break down the impact of the outage are Lewie Pugh, Executive Vice President of OOIDA, and Tom Crowley of the Association's Business Services Department. Gentlemen, thanks for stopping by.
Always good to be here, Scott.
Great to be here, buddy. Thank you.
So this outage, Tom, it's our first big one, really, since the ELD mandate took effect in late 2017. Let's just start for those people who are affected by this specifically, working off the AT&T network. This means their ELDs were not working as they should, right? And that means we're talking paper logs here.
Quite possibly. I mean, if the ELD goes down and, they can't transfer the information or they're not getting the information back and forth, the feds do, kind of run through what would happen, say roadside. You get pulled over by a DOT and they want to see your logs. They want you to transfer them. If you're unable, it says if the cellular network limitation that prevents the ELD from transferring data to the FMCSA's web services, the safety official will use ELD display or the printout to verify compliance. The issue becomes if your ELD doesn't retain that information, that last 7 days worth of information. That's when you would have to go back and recreate the last 7 days.
Who's doing that? I mean, how are you supposed to do that?
That's a good question. I couldn't tell you what I had for breakfast this morning. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and we're going to get into the wider implications of this because this kind of is the first big outage we've seen like this. It won't be the last. We're going to have other ones down the line that are maybe even bigger in scale. But in terms of this one, as kind of a guide for what you do moving forward, we're talking going back several days and recreating those logs. That's not easy. And then you're dealing with, compliance officers who may not necessarily be sympathetic to the problem that you're facing. And it's really going to depend on who you're dealing with at a specific time, right?
Yeah, I would agree. And I mean, not only are you relying upon safety officers who may not be sympathetic, they may not even know. I mean, that's the thing you deal. That happens a lot, yeah. There's lots of truck drivers out there. There's lots of safety enforcement agencies out there, state and local. State seems to get notified of things better maybe than local, but I'm sure there's one truck cop out there somewhere that doesn't even know about the AT&T and things that happened here, and they're probably like, "Yeah, right, driver," and
tough luck.
Yeah, tough luck.
Yeah, nice
driver.
try.
So now we get into the data queues and all these other fun processes that aren't really in favor of the driver most times.
True enough.
And Lewie, this was, OOIDA has, since before the mandate went into effect, been expressing concerns about relying on technology like this for this reason and for many others as well. This just kind of hammers home that point, right? That relying on an ELD and forcing truck drivers to kind of go through this and rely on that technology, you're just setting yourself up for all sorts of headaches and problems and nuisances, really, all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, this is stuff OOIDA's been saying for 10 years. We said it long before the mandate. And lo and behold, what do when the ELD breaks? You go back to the paper log that worked for, 100 years?
For a long time.
90 years.
Yeah.
And the issue, too, you got a lot of drivers out there that have only used ELDs, that you hand them a paper log and they're going to get lost. I mean, back in the day, how often did you find a mistake in your logs, Lewie? It happened to me quite often.
Right.
And I knew how to log. You knew how to log. Put some people in there that only know what the ELD tells them, and where are they going to be at?
Yeah, Tom, I mean, you take calls on this, and I know you haven't really talked to anybody who had this problem on Thursday because
they can't call in.
They can't call you.
Yeah, we usually get calls over any issue that's going on in the trucking industry, and as we was talking earlier, nobody called in about this one.
Yeah, which makes sense because they don't have a way to do that.
Call.
If there were people calling in to OOIDA, talking to you directly, looking for advice on this kind of thing, I mean, the advice is pretty simple. I mean, you got to go to paper logs. But again, when you're looking at the bigger picture here, what would you be telling people if they were calling in right now?
Most of the time, I would probably be giving them education on how to log, because the folks that would be calling in would be like, okay, so I got to go to paper logs. What do I do? How do I do these paper logs?
Yeah.
And people are so reliant on the ELD now to keep track of their time that, the ELD tells them if they're getting close to their hours limitations. I mean, back in the day, that was up to the driver to keep track of your hours. I doubt there's drivers out there, a lot of drivers out there that don't have a clue on how to do a recap. What do you think?
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. And I mean, for all means, I'm sure Tom and the guys in compliance would be giving lots of remedial log training and also probably notate why you're doing what you're doing because of what happened. So, because 5 months from now you get audited, we've all forgot.
And that's the thing, DOT can call back 6 months on your logs. And if you don't notate, it's kind of hard to come up with why something happened.
Yeah, exactly. Like you said, I can't remember what I had for breakfast this morning half the time. Real quick here, we've got about a minute left, but I want to jump ahead to the future here. We were talking earlier before we got on the mics here about this push for autonomous trucks. As Lewie laughs, I mean, you think about the technology being tied into something relatively simple like an ELD. Then you're talking autonomous trucks. I mean, the concerns that you had about ELDs, OOIDA had back, several years ago, are going to be amplified, 100, 1,000 times?
1,000,000 times. I mean, because an ELD, if it screws up, it doesn't really kill anybody. Yeah. An AV, if it screws up, it's a family of 5.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt about that. The technology that goes into this stuff, you take that technology or cripple it, and, if we're dependent on it, where are we at?
Yeah, again, we've got a lot of questions about this, not a whole lot of answers, but it does beg the question of where we may be headed here as we rely more and more on technology. And if something goes wrong, it can go really wrong. And in the future, it may go really wrong, unfortunately. So we'll keep an eye on this. Lewie, Tom, never a dull moment. We appreciate you coming by and sharing your expertise with us.
Always good to be here.
Thanks for having us, buddy. Be safe out there, drivers.
For updates on this story, check out landline.media. Mark, back to you.
Thanks, Scott. Next, I'll discuss an FMCSA study of detention time with OOIDA's Jay Grimes, and Ryan Witkowski talks with Dylan Wecht of Truckers Against Trafficking. We'll be right back. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
Capital Reman, your leader in remanufactured diesel engines and components, is celebrating its 10th anniversary. Let us help you avoid costly downtime and repairs by visiting capitalreman.com today. Use code OOIDA10 to receive your member benefits.
Stock up on Howe's Diesel Treat, the nation's most trusted anti-gel. And to be safe from the harshest winter conditions, make sure you have Howe's Diesel Lifeline on hand, the fastest-acting gelling rescue product. Available nationwide, Howe's products are designed to keep you rolling through the toughest conditions. Visit howesproducts.com.
Attention professional drivers, are you behind on your tax filings? You owe money? Integrity Tax Relief Group frees drivers from IRS trouble. You watch the road, we'll keep an eye on the IRS. Call now. 855-976-4291.
Buckling up keeps everyone safe on the roads. Learn more at www.sharetheroadsafely.gov. Paid for by FMCSA.
The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration plans to study detention time and how it affects the trucking industry. But first, the agency needs to gather some information. Welcome back to Landline Now. This is Regulatory Roundup, and I'm Mark Reddig. I'm joined as always by OOIDA Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes. Jay, thanks for joining us.
Good to be back.
Well, glad to have you here. I want to start off with this. Detention time is nothing new. It's been a problem in trucking for a long time. So why has the agency decided to study detention time right now at this point in time?
Right. So it's on the heels of a 2014 study that was really wide-ranging from the DOT Inspector General, but it kind of came back and said there still needs to be more information gathered. And then in the last go-round of the major highway reauthorization bill and the 2021 Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, Congress directed FMCSA to carry out a further, more comprehensive study. And since the bill was enacted, FMCSA has kind of been going through that process. And we saw an initial proposal last year that sought feedback and kind of on the outline of the study and the information gathering process. FMCSA has reviewed the comments they've received and kind of submitted now this final information collection request to the Office of Management and Budget, kind of gearing up to start the official study, which sounds like it's going to be a year-long study. So I think much more in-depth, much more comprehensive than we've seen in previous attempts.
Now, as I mentioned at the start, the FMCSA is collecting some comments regarding that study before moving forward. What specific information is FMCSA asking for?
Yeah, so really looking to get any final recommendations on what they're submitting to OMB. And they've kind of put out the three primary objectives of the study: to assess the frequency and severity of driver detention time, to assess the utility of existing intelligent transportation systems, and then to prepare a final report that summarizes the findings and answers the research questions and offers strategy. So kind of FMCSA at this point, I think the scope of the information collection request is really kind of formulated. There is one final, comment period here. We filed comments, I think, back in August of last year once, FMCSA put this initial request out. In this latest proposal, kind of took into some account what we recommended, which is good. It's going to be interesting to see, how FMCSA formulates the study once it gets up and going here after it gets OMB approval.
You mentioned OOIDA's comments earlier and that they did take into consideration some of what the association recommended. Can you give us a couple of examples?
Yeah, so there were two, I think, main recommendations we had, and really kind of overall very supportive of this study. Really want to see the accurate information gathered on detention time so that Congress, FMCSA can perhaps at last finally make some substantive policy reforms and proposals that can, on one hand, reduce excessive detention time, on one hand, make sure drivers are potentially compensated for that detention time. And one of the main things about this planned study is it's really going to be reliant on telematic information, ELD data, and we understand that can be helpful into providing a more accurate, better picture of detention time in a number of ways. We also wanted to make sure that drivers who didn't have the telematic equipment, who don't use ELDs, could be part of the study. FMCSA has kind of come back and said, now to be involved in this study, you got to use the telematics and ELD systems. To kind of that same point, FMCSA has, I think, initially proposed that they were going to be using a single vendor called Speed Gauge and their telematics system. FMCSA said, okay, even though you've got to use the ELDs and telematics, we aren't going to limit just to speed gauge users. We're going to do some more outreach to vendors that concentrate on small businesses. So that was good to see. And of course, with all the reliance on the telematics and other technology systems in this process, we wanted to make sure that personal and private data information is protected. And in the initial notice, FMCSA did not really indicate how they were going to provide that data protection. We said that any personal information should be aggregated rather than individualized, and the agency should better clarify how any data will be analyzed in regards to privacy protection. So FMCSA kind of took that into account and said they're going to take all the necessary precautions to ensure the confidentiality of participant data. As part of this process, all drivers and carriers will be assigned anonymous identification numbers to link the data sets, and FMCSA will scrub the data sets of information that could potentially identify individual participants, and that personal identifying data, will not be shared with the agency. So I think they put in some safeguards when it comes to data protection, which we will be supportive of. So got a few more kind of regulatory bureaucratic steps for the agency to kind of finish off here before the actual study can begin in earnest. And this is really going to be, we've got a year-long look at the data. We've got, I think, 2,500 drivers that are being included, and it's going to be across the board, different types of carriers, different sizes of business, a wide variety of trucking operations that are going to be a part of it. So I think once this study is completed, we're really going to have a much better picture, much better analysis on hand to assess the relationship between detention time, safety, characteristics of carriers, which locations are more problematic, and all the impacts on the driver schedule on a daily, weekly, yearly basis.
I want to go back to a couple of things there. One of them, I know that there's some people out there asking the question that I did the first time I heard the term telematics, which is, what the heck is that? Can you kind of give us a layman's definition of telematics?
Yeah, it's sort of a system installed on the truck to measure different variables of the vehicle and driver performance. There's a lot of companies out there that are kind of, contracting their technology systems to help carriers kind of analyze different aspects of performance. So, we know it's on an increasing amount of trucks. I think in this study, it's really going to help to have accurate data and really help transmit that data to FMCSA.
OOIDA has wanted some kind of action on detention time for quite a while, as you've mentioned. And I'm wondering, this looks like a good step in the right direction. Is it enough? I mean, what's the association's view of how FMCSA is proceeding and what they're doing?
Yeah, I think it's a necessary, but I'm not yet sold on that this is going to give us all the answers that we're looking for from FMCSA. I think we're still going to need some more support on the congressional side, continuing to put the pressure on FMCSA, and frankly, some the carriers, the shippers, the receivers that are adding to excessive detention time. So it's going to be a helpful piece, but it's not the only solution. And certainly one of the things that we've advocated for has been this repeal of the FLSA, Fair Labor Standards Act, motor carrier exemption that restricts drivers, employee drivers, from getting overtime pay beyond 40 hours a week. And if you take away that exemption, I think you're going to see a lot more incentive from the private sector to move drivers through these shippers, receivers, loading and unloading facilities where they're not held up more than 2 hours at a time, where really right now there's no financial pressure to get them through.
The FMCSA, while they're doing this, is also collecting information regarding another important topic in the trucking industry, which is lease-purchase agreements. And this certainly is a big one. We've talked about it quite a bit lately. Jay, what precisely is the agency asking for in this case?
Yeah, again, looking for more data, more information, and they've put out requests for public information really to try and have more evidence on what individuals who are involved in these lease purchase schemes have to deal with in terms of their contracts and their documentation that they have to submit. And this is part of the ongoing truck leasing task force, and really looking at this issue broadly and reviewing the leases to identify terms and conditions that may be fair to drivers, really looking at the inequity of these lease purchase arrangements and the individuals that get taken advantage of and have to agree to terms that they're never going to meet, getting sold on this notion that eventually one day they'll be able to own their own truck. But in a lot of cases, the terms are set up by the carriers that control the amount of drivers' work, and they're never able to meet the payments to pay off the leasing agreements that they signed. So really hopeful that the committee, and this is something that they've had 3 meetings on already, continuing to review in hopes of really providing some recommendations to not only FMCSA and the Department of Transportation, but the Department of Labor as well. And the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is involved in this matter. And any data on the leasing arrangement that's going to come from this request is going to be passed on to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau too, in really hopes of them being able to do some more assessments and analysis of these problematic lease purchases.
They're looking here to get people to send them actual lease purchase agreements. And, a moment ago we were talking about privacy when it came to data involved in other things. I would think some truckers might be reluctant to share lease information. Are there concerns over who will be able to see this information, and how is the agency trying to protect that privacy?
Yeah, I think FMCSA is aware of some of those concerns, and within this notice have put in some information to try and protect any personal data that might be submitted. So they've got a few placeholders here. First of all, encourage, you can redact any personal information that you would like. If you don't want to go through that kind of a tedious process, there's going to be a kind of a separate way to submit materials. If your comments contain commercial or financial information that is customarily treated as private, you have to designate that submission as confidential business information. And if that's marked in a way that I think they refer to it as pro-pin or confidential to indicate that it contains proprietary information, that's kind of going to be sent to a separate, more protected place within the public docket. So it's not going to be on hand for public viewing. So a couple of processes that FMCSA is going to be implementing here to make sure that anyone who's submitting data has their personal data protected, especially when it comes to these financial contracts and personal data information.
We have just a few seconds left, and I know that's not enough time to fully discuss this, but this is a topic that OOIDA has heard from countless truckers on. What are a couple of the points that OOIDA sees as the major problems with these lease purchases?
Yeah, I think it's drivers who aren't familiar with lease purchase agreements, who aren't reading the fine print, are really getting taken advantage of carriers. So we want to see some guidelines, some best practices, some qualifying criteria for these leasing agreements moving forward that can prevent these predatory leasing schemes from really exploiting individuals that want to maybe start out in a lease purchase agreement, but don't want to see these contractual terms really take advantage of those individuals.
Okay. Well, Jay, thank you very much for the information.
All righty. Thank you.
I've been talking with Jay Grimes of OOIDA. Landline Now will be back in a moment.
Penske owns and operates some of the best-maintained vehicles on the planet. Our used trucks come with a 5-year maintenance report and pre-sale inspection. So if you're in the market for a top-quality pre-owned truck, look no further. Search our inventory today at PenskeUsedTrucks.com.
Control your toll costs and eliminate tolling headaches with Prepass Tolls. Prepass Tolls means toll volume discounts. Just one invoice for all tolls and fewer violations. Call 877-878-5970 or go to Prepass.com.
Ready to make more money? Use a better load board. For a limited time, get 50% off TruckStop Loadboard Pro. Just go to truckstop.com/go and enter promo code READY2023 when you purchase Loadboard Pro.
It's tested and proven. Burn 2.1% less fuel when you balance all wheel ends with Centromatic. Call 800-523-8473 to get the OOIDA discount.
Landline Now, welcome back. Today marks National Human Trafficking Awareness Day in Canada, part of a week-long initiative by the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance. This annual event is aimed to bring awareness and outreach efforts to educate commercial motor vehicle drivers, motor carriers, law enforcement officers, and the general public about the crime of human trafficking, the signs to look for, and what to do if you suspect someone is being trafficked. Ryan Witkowski of Landline Magazine recently spoke with Dylan Wecht of Truckers Against Trafficking about this effort.
And so, Dylan, I guess to get us started out, for those who maybe don't know about Truckers Against Trafficking, tell us a little bit about your organization and the work you guys do.
Absolutely. So Truckers Against Trafficking is a 501c3, which means it's a nonprofit organization. And we exist to educate, equip, empower, and mobilize members of the trucking, bus, and energy industries to combat human trafficking as part of their everyday jobs. And our theory of change is rooted in the belief that by educating and equipping members of these industries with the tools that they need to spot human trafficking and then report it effectively, we can mobilize millions of people to move from just passive bystanders to active disruptors. And we call these men and women our everyday heroes. It's a constantly growing mobile army of trained, concerned citizens who, again, can provide a set of eyes and ears for law enforcement in recovering victims and arresting traffickers.
Well, when it comes to truckers specifically, why are truckers so important in accomplishing that goal of discovering and ending human trafficking?
Absolutely. So as our name suggests, and one of the main industries we work with is the trucking industry. And just to go back to when we started our organization, we were thinking, how can we combat such a large crime, something that is both domestic and international, labor and sex trafficking? What population of people could we train would really make a difference if they had these tools? And we thought truckers. They're the eyes and ears of our nation's highways. They're trained to be vigilant. They see things that other people do not see. And they're oftentimes in areas where traffickers will bring their victims. So rest stops, truck stops, gas stations, hotels and motels. So by equipping truck drivers with these tools, they could notice activity that seems suspicious or criminal activity and then report it. So it's just giving them a different set of eyes to view the world and just look out for these possible indicators of human trafficking. They are an ideal population, both because, like I said, they're vigilant and they are great in numbers. So they're obviously in more places than law enforcement or any other individual when it comes to being on the road.
No, I absolutely think you're right. Like you're already there. Equip them with the tools they need to help identify these things, and you can really start making a difference. And I guess you talk a little bit about some of those red flags and being aware. What are some of those that truckers should be aware of?
Sure. So some of the red flag indicators that truckers should be aware of. First of all, and we've seen and had multiple cases where there will be a car or an RV parked out back by the trucks. Again, when it comes to certain gas stations or rest areas, they're typically parked up front by the store or getting gas, whatever it may be. So that could be a red flag indicator of these cars and RVs backed by the trucks. If there is a third party, which would be the trafficker, or as some people say, a pimp, that's by legal definition of trafficker. If a woman or man seems to be under the control of someone else, again, if they're getting out of this vehicle and going to different trucks or going to, truckers are coming into an RV or whatever it may be, that's something to look for. Then if you are to speak to a potential victim of human trafficking, they could have a lack of knowledge of their whereabouts. So movement is not a required element of this crime. Someone could hypothetically, and it has happened, to be trafficked just in, their apartment, their home, whatever it may be. But movement is used a lot of the time by traffickers, both to evade law enforcement and to increase their revenue, to make more money in different towns, cities, states, provinces, whatever it may be. So oftentimes they will not know where they are because they're being moved so quickly, where they are going. So if you are having a conversation with the potential victim, that could be something to take note of. Another thing would be not in control of any identification, their passport, their driver's license, whatever it may be, restricted or controlled communication. Not making eye contact, not really allowed to speak for themselves. And then again, just making or using language that refers to a trafficker, a pimp. They'll use the term daddy, making a quota, making a certain amount of money, signs like that. And I do want to emphasize with all these indicators that human trafficking is not an easy crime to spot. It's not like a narcotics or a firearms case where you see the contraband and you're able to act off that. These are all going to be signs of human behavior for the most part. So while it is difficult, just noting these red flag indicators, and when you see a couple of them, you kind of want to start to ask more questions and look more into the situation.
Well, you guys do a great job of, disseminating a lot of that information, giving in-cap stickers and different things for truckers to be able to keep up on that. Truckersagainsttrafficking.org is the website to get all of that information as well. But one thing that, obviously spotting it is one thing, but doing something about it is another thing. I would never ask anybody to put themselves into harm's way, but obviously, this is a situation that you're trying to have an amicable outcome for. How are some of the ways that maybe drivers can help without putting themselves into harm's way?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And that is of great importance. We do not want anyone to put themselves in harm's way. We are not asking anyone to be a vigilante or get involved in these potentially very dangerous and violent situations. What we emphasize is to contact law enforcement while it is happening with the red flag indicators. And I will say that I have spoke with hundreds of law enforcement officers, both in Canada and the United States, and they all say that it may not be a human trafficking case, but we would rather you make that call than not. So call law enforcement when you see these red flag indicators, or when you have this gut feeling that something is not right, and they will take it over. They are trained to do so. They will investigate. They will make the arrest if that's what it comes to. But we emphasize contacting law enforcement. Do not get involved. Do not put yourself in a potentially very dangerous situation. Call the guys who are trained to do that.
Well, Dylan, final one I have for you. We started out the interview talking about Human Trafficking Awareness Day throughout Canada. What are some of the things that Truckers Against Trafficking is doing to help spread that awareness?
Yes. So we have rolled out several initiatives that truck companies, truck driving schools, and individual drivers can incorporate. So the number one thing I would say for either a company or an individual driver who is listening or watching this would be to train. We have a 27-minute video for truck drivers to take, and it gives you more information on these red flag indicators that I was talking about. It tells you how to speak with potential victims. It gives you background information on the crime of human trafficking, kind of the laws. It is a very good training. It's 27 minutes long, as I said. So I would emphasize that truck drivers take that, or that companies have their drivers take that video, and you receive a certification. And then you can obviously look into more information or order resources and materials for us. All of our trainings and resources and materials are completely free of charge. So both with that training that I mentioned, as well as any materials and resources on our website, please just let us know. Our general email is there, and we will send you what you need. Some other things that we have been doing with provincial trucking associations is having them launch a social media campaign. So this is, again, to get their members to train, to get them to start looking more into human trafficking, to be aware of what is going on. And we're doing this through our materials. We have wallet cards, we have brochures, more training videos, and more niche areas. So whether they're over-the-road trucking guys, regional, local, in-home movers and delivery, we have materials that are specifically made for each of these industries. We're also asking that trucking companies, collect a driver feedback. So maybe making a brief survey, asking drivers if they've had experience with human trafficking cases or potential signs of human trafficking. And then finally, we're promoting our app. We have had an app, but we recently relaunched it, and this is available on the iPhone and Android. And again, it has these red flag indicators, more materials, and then you can, get in touch with law enforcement and see what information you need to give law enforcement when you are calling one of these cases in. And with all of that, with these initiatives, we are working directly with either a trucking association or a company to make it specific to, their training modules in whatever systems they have in place. So I want to emphasize, if anyone's interested, either for tomorrow or in the future, we work with everyone on an individual basis to see what the best method would be.
Well, truckersagainsttrafficking.org is that website. And just reading some of the, success stories, maybe is not the best way to put it, but some of the stories that you guys share on the website. Obviously what your guys' mission is achieving its goal, because we're seeing a lot of these crimes get halted before they really get to a really heinous level.
Yes. And I would like to add that another thing that we are doing is we are working with CVSA, Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance, with their Human Trafficking Awareness Initiative. And this initiative basically is getting more information to truck drivers and to trucking companies via the public sector. So we are working with several provinces. I think we have 6 or 7 provinces that have said that they're taking part in this initiative. And it started on Monday and it will go until Friday. And basically what these law enforcement and other public sector individuals are doing are visiting truck stops. They're visiting truck companies. They're also handing out wallet cards that weigh scales. So we thank them for all the work we're doing. So if you see increased materials in your province, that is to thank the provincial government. I know in New Brunswick, there is a specific officer who is driving throughout the entire province, visiting every single weigh scale in every truck stop, giving materials, asking them to train. So that's another initiative that we are taking part in.
He is Dylan Wecht. He is the Public Sector Engagement Specialist for Truckers Against Trafficking. Dylan, appreciate you joining us today. Thank you for taking the time out, and keep fighting the good fight.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Again, that was Landline Magazine's Ryan Witkowski speaking with Dylan Wecht with Truckers Against Trafficking. CVSA's Human Trafficking Awareness Initiative in Canada will continue throughout this week. The next campaign will happen in Mexico from March 11th to the 15th. The U.S. campaign happened last month. CVSA says it will combine Canada's data with data submitted by Mexico and the U.S. and report the results later this summer. You can follow coverage about this issue and many others that we cover through our website, landline.media, or in the pages of Landline Magazine. Meanwhile, for more information on Truckers Against Trafficking, you can visit their website at truckersagainsttrafficking.org. Again, that's truckersagainsttrafficking.org. We'll have that web address at our website, landline.media. Just click on the photo or headline in the red box to find all the information we mentioned here on the show. We'll be right back. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Are you tired of the IRS following you around like a dark cloud? Call 888-557-4020 and get your life back.
Dispatch, I picked up that load of steel, so I'm ready to roll. Sounds good. Remember, we're getting paid by weight, so make sure to use a cat scale.
I wouldn't weigh anywhere else.
Forget miss accuracy, weigh your truck on a cat scale.
Since you started, what you've loved about trucking is the freedom. Heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At OOIDA, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to OOIDA.com, because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
And we're back, and so is our state legislative expert, Keith Goebel, who made his weekly trek up to Studio A for an update on the latest trucking news on the state level. Today, we're going to highlight the state lawmakers who are trying to do something about the truck parking crisis. Keith, good to see you.
Scott, good to see you.
So we've got more and more leaders on the state level that seem to be taking a crack at the truck parking problem. You've highlighted a few of them in a recent piece on landline.media, so let's run through these. Starting with Florida, we've talked about this before. They are really trying to address a pretty serious truck parking shortage on a major corridor there in the state.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, we've talked about Florida. I think this initially popped up. It was late in the year last year, obviously, as they were preparing for the start of the 2024 legislative session. And among the things that happen in states around the country as they prepare for upcoming work and meetings is, governors will have their proposed budgets for the year, whatever budget the focus is. In this particular instance, talking about the transportation budget, and one of the things that Governor Ron DeSantis there is advocating for is $25 million to help provide commercial truck parking relief along the state's highway system. That is an issue that they have identified in Florida as being an urgent need of addressing. And I know specifically one of the things that the Florida Department of Transportation has provided officials with there in the state is how bad the situation is, specifically along a portion of Interstate 4 in the Osceola Polk County line and Interstate 95, that stretch of highway, which the Florida DOT says they've got up to 20,000 trucks a day that travel that stretch. Now, along that stretch, they say that there are fewer than 40 truck parking spots.
Yeah, that's wild. That's just a wild thing to think about.
Oh, I know. Yeah, absolutely. It's, obviously, you hear from folks who travel around the country, in this particular case in Florida, and it's not, it's not unexpected to hear that there's a shortage of truck parking spaces. But
that is a big shortage.
To see some actual numbers that the state DOT has put together, it's not anecdotal. It is specific. How bad it is in that stretch. The Florida DOT, they say that they need in that area another 450 spaces now. And over the course of the next several years, they need to add another 750. And I guess I shouldn't say specific to that area, but, around the state.
Yeah.
But yes, that is that will get, hopefully, obviously it's going to get lawmakers' attention. Hopefully it will spur them to actually getting something done.
Yeah, $25 million, that would do a lot of good in terms of reducing the shortage there. And hopefully we'll see that come to fruition and changes quickly. For the people especially traveling that stretch of roadway, you will certainly notice that that shortage there with just, 36 or so truck parking spots. Well, let's move on now. Let's try to kind of zip through these states here that are taking action on truck parking. Let's move to New Jersey now. Where they've got a bill, I think also a positive development here, that would essentially make sure that there's enough truck parking in warehouse developments, right?
Yeah, it's unique. It's unique, specific to the truck parking issue, to have really a singular focus on if you're going to, this bill would do, this assembly bill, it would require any sort of application for development that proposes like a large warehouse. that application would have to include or provide for what the legislation states as an adequate number of on-site parking spaces. So obviously that they would be able to accommodate the trucks that are servicing that warehouse, and have that as a condition of the preliminary site plan approval. So, a unique way of trying to address this at the point of where the problem begins, essentially. I mean, if you've got a truck that's waiting to deliver, drop off, if you're going to have this massive facility, trying to avoid situations where you have an overflow of truck parking that spills out onto other local properties or rights of way. The legislation states that have to be able to provide the space for these trucks so that there is no overflow off of their property between overnight hours.
Yeah.
Looking to, again, not so much focus on what a particular city might need to do, or like in Florida, they're talking about making spaces available along the interstates. This is essentially at any type of massive complex that they're wanting to build. They would need to make sure that they have the parking that will accommodate those trucks that are servicing that warehouse.
Which is a pretty common sense piece of legislation that you would hope catches on there in New Jersey. Let's move on just a little bit to the north here to New York State, where we're kind of going the opposite direction, it looks like, with a couple of bills that would increase the stakes for truck parking violations.
Yeah, and this is legislation. There are multiple bills, Senate bills, that have been introduced. Gosh, it goes back a handful of years. These are kind of annual pursuits in New York. So it's difficult to tell at this point if anything's going to change with these. Nevertheless, it's always good to communicate what's going on out there. And these are the idea of Senator Leroy Comrie, who's out of Queens. And what he's wanting to do is he's wanting to get into state law authorization of a $1,000 fine for trucks that are parked unattended on New York City streets. As he points out, as it is now, if you're illegally parked, if you have a truck tractor that's illegally parked, there's no fine. There is a towing, obviously, that could result from that, and if it's towed, it's about a $160 fee. But his belief is that that's not enough to discourage the behavior of leaving a vehicle, a large truck in this case, unattended in city neighborhoods around New York City. So he's wanting to implement a $1,000 fine for one of his bills. His other bill would impose a $400 fine if a truck is parked overnight on residential streets there in New York City. The focus is southeast Queens between John F. Kennedy Airport, LaGuardia. That is the focus of that legislation. But yeah, a couple of different efforts that he has that he's been trying to get through for years.
Yeah.
But trying to address the overflow of trucks.
Yeah, and I get it, but again, you got to provide a place for these people to park, and clearly there's a shortage there in New York City for understandable reasons. But where are they supposed to go, I guess, is a question.
Sure.
Let's move on quickly here. We don't have a whole lot of time, but let's talk about Pennsylvania for a moment. I know they had a study recently that looked into the truck parking problem. It looks like they're kind of creating some legislation based on what they found out.
Yeah, they're wanting to have a thorough and comprehensive study of truck parking there in the state. So this essentially just would direct their joint state government commission to get that done.
There you go. And Washington State, real quick.
Yeah, Washington State, something that we've been following here as of recent, just legislation that would require creating a plan for commercial truck parking that's located near interstates, ports, other areas in the state that they categorize as generating a significant amount of commercial trips. Just looking to get moving in the right direction, looking to address truck parking concerns that they do have there. And in Washington State in this particular instance, but hopefully stuff like this will continue to see some expansion on trying to address the issue.
Yeah, kudos again, Washington State, which is really taking a look at a lot of these issues. We talked about restroom access, I think, last year. So they are trying to solve the problems. Keith, I don't think we solved the problem today, but we'll keep at it. We appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
That was Keith Goebel of Landline Magazine, and this has been Landline Now. We're out of time for today, but we appreciate you tuning in and hope we will see you again soon.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
I'm a dad,
a son,
a husband,
wife,
I'm a writer,
photographer.
I farm.
I'm a veteran.
I love old cars, fishing,
my kids,
chrome,
and I am
a professional truck driver.
And together we are OOIDA.
OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us!
Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit OOIDA.com.